Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Let's begin today with the government's decision to go ahead with the construction of a nuclear power station at Hinkley in Somerset. The £18 billion project, which is being financed by the French and the Chinese, was put on hold by Theresa May soon after she became Prime Minister, amid reports that she had concerns about Chinese involvement in Britain's nuclear power industry. But it seems it's now back on, although ministers say they will impose significant new safeguards for future projects of this kind. Here's the Business Secretary, Greg Clark, speaking earlier.
It's an important upgrade of our energy supplies for the next 60 years, contributing 7% of clean, reliable energy and a major step forward for our new nuclear power programme and an 18 billion investment in the economy, creating 26,000 jobs.
So that was Greg Clark. The government's made its mind up. What, if anything, though, has changed since the decision was put on hold? Let's talk to our correspondent, Ben Wright. Ben, has anything changed? We've heard they're talking about tough new safeguards. Do we know what they might be?
Well, on the fundamentals, Joe, no, it doesn't seem a great deal has changed at all. Not in terms of the structure of this deal, the Chinese involvement, the price that's going to be paid for electricity. But there is this sort of change around the question of the UK having a sort of special share option in the future that would enable them to block the sale of a stake that other companies like EDF have in future infrastructure projects like this. And Number 10 are saying this is quite a big change in securing Britain's national security going forward. But I think there will be many who will ask, well, look, after this big surprise, pausing this huge deal, you know, was it worth it? Or is this actually just quite a lot of political theatre to show that Theresa May is sort of pressing the reset button, really? And I think there will be some who are asking that question today as well.
And it will go ahead. I mean, there's something about the French have got to sort of rubber stamp it, or EDF have got to sign it off. But it will, of course, now go ahead. It
will. EDF have welcomed this. Theresa May spoke to President Hollande about this just before the deal was announced once again. The diplomats between China and the UK have talked about it. Yes, this is now going to happen. The questions do remain, though, as well. Labour have asked for guarantees that the Bradwell station that is now likely to be built, that controversial Chinese power plant, they're asking for guarantees that that will not mean Chinese workers coming to the UK and taking care of that. They're also asking questions, too, about the price being paid. But no, this is going to go ahead. Despite this sort of surprising 2-month pause that we've seen over the last couple of months.
Ben Wright, thank you. Well, we're joined now by the former Energy Secretary, Ed Davey. He was the coalition minister who struck the deal to build Hinkley Point. Welcome to the Daily Politics. So we've had this pause. Do you think there's anything different in the deal from what you can tell?
Well, I'd like to hear the details, but this special share that they're talking about to help with national security issues was something I proposed when we were in government. The Liberal Democrats were arguing for it. Unfortunately, George Osborne said he didn't want it and he overruled us. So I'm glad to see it.
So you're pleased, yeah?
I think it's the sensible thing, and that's why I proposed it a few years ago.
How surprised were you by the pause, though?
Quite surprised, really, because I think they've managed to annoy the Chinese, annoy the French, annoy other people who are investing there. What it will mean is people who want to invest in the UK, there'll be an extra political risk because they think people will renege on deals or delay them. So it's not been it's not been very well handled by Theresa May and her team. But if it results in a project which will help keep the lights on, which will help us tackle climate change through low carbon, and has this extra national security guarantee with a special share, then I think it's the right thing to do.
I mean, you were the minister in coalition who did this deal. So how do you feel about your party, the Liberal Democrats, who said this morning that the Hinkley Point project should be abandoned? So they're opposing the very deal you negotiated in government.
Well, I'm not surprised because Tim Farron has always been quite sceptical about nuclear power. So, you know, he's the leader, so you might expect him to say that. But
is he wrong, though?
Well, I think he's wrong because I think if we're going to tackle climate change, we're going to need a hell of a lot of low-carbon electricity. And I want that to come from wind and solar and tidal. And I'm very proud to say I'm the British minister who commissioned more renewable power than anyone in history. So I love renewables. But I don't believe, when you look at the analysis, that they can do it alone, because we're going to have electricity for our heating, electricity for transport, as well as electricity for power. That's a lot of green electricity, and nuclear can help as part of a mix.
Do you agree with that? We need nuclear as part of that mix. And this is from a Liberal Democrat who, in his own words, believes and loves renewables.
Well, Ed is a greater expert than I am, and I'm not sceptical about nuclear power. I have to say to you, I'm sceptical about this particular issue, and we looked at it at the time that I was chair of the Public Accounts Committee. It's hugely expensive. According to the most recent national audit figures, they're worse than the ones you showed at the top of the programme, Joe. They reckon that the subsidy to EDF will now be £30 billion. The price we're paying is double the price of electricity as it is now, because the price of oil has gone down. And the other thing is, this is a big, big project. The Finns are trying to build a similar capability. It was supposed to be completed in 2009. Now the latest date is 2018. The costs have gone up fourfold. So I think this tends to be in the vanity project area as far as I'm concerned. And I'd far rather see smaller nuclear projects and other capabilities to make sure the lights are kept on.
So you would like to see it abandoned?
I'm a sceptic. I have to say to you, Ed, I'm a sceptic.
Let's talk about the price,
though. Not because I'm
anti-nuclear.
anti-nuclear.
Because we discussed the price at the time, and it seems incredibly high when you look at the prices for other forms of energy. £92.50 per megawatt hour. That is double the current wholesale electricity price. How can that be good value for money for the taxpayer?
Well, first of all, I don't know whether it's going to be good value for money, and actually no one can know. And let me explain why. We only start paying for the electricity if it's built. And let's say that's 2025, and the contract lasts for 35 years. To know whether it's good value for money now, you have to know the price of wholesale electricity between 2025 and 2060, and you have to know the price of carbon. Now, maybe Margaret and the National Audit Office know this. Well, they're clairvoyants, they're the mystic Megs of energy policy. I don't know it.
But
and I'm afraid, I'm sorry, the reality is one has to take decisions in government, because it's not just price. You have to think about climate change, which is critical, and energy security. There's three together. And we've had to invest in renewables at a higher price than this.
Right,
So,
but hang on,
I don't know
renewables
whether
now are
Margaret
cheaper.
and National Audit Office against those investments in renewables.
No, but Ed, when you settle a price, you settle it against projections that your economists will undertake.
Of course.
And
but
all I'm saying is
they
that
are projections. Do you know what? The wholesale price of electricity has changed in 2 years by a lot.
Of course.
So it changes all the time, and the economists tell you that.
Of course it changes all the time, but all I'm saying is that looking at today's figures, it looks a crazily expensive option.
But you're wrong
And
to look
it's
at today's figures. But that's a mistake you're making.
But are you saying you're making literally a stab in the dark then? Because actually what it could be is even more expensive in the future with technology. It could make other forms of energy even cheaper.
Well, no, this is the whole point. You're absolutely right. There's a lot of uncertainties in energy policy, massive uncertainties, not just on what prices will be, but what technology will do, and you just don't know. But sometimes you actually have to come to a decision. And given this is the right for keeping the lights on, to make sure people can plug their kettles on, can watch their TVs and so on, given it's the right decision to tackle climate change, I think it's rather weird that people say they know the price between 2025 and 2060, and then are going to talk against it.
Well,
it's a bit illogical.
Right,
Okay, no, let me just say to you, it may not be the right decision to keep the lights on, and it may not be the right decision given the speed at which technology is changing. And that's the other...
What would you do then? Where would you go? Well, hang on, let Margaret finish.
What I hear from experts, and I accept, Ed's got more technical expertise than I have in this area, but what I hear from experts is that nuclear technology is changing much more quickly, that there are smaller stations that you can build much more rapidly, they'll come on stream more quickly, make sure the lights are on better.
They won't,
and what I also hear is that renewables are actually developing much more quickly.
They are,
becoming more cheaper.
And they're cheaper.
They're coming cheaper more quickly. Solar is suddenly becoming much more viable than it was a few years ago. And therefore, going for this big vanity project may not be actually the quality of what we want.
I don't disagree with a lot of you said, Margaret. Renewables are coming down. I mean, it's fantastic. Solar, I'm a huge fan of solar and wind and tidal.
So why not invest in those more?
Because if we're going to tackle climate change and take climate change seriously, and given this heat wave we're having in September, I think we should.
Yeah, we all agree about that.
The truth is, if you put all your eggs in one basket,
Nobody's saying that.
then you are putting a risk of the fight against climate change. And what I believe we should do is invest in all these low-carbon technologies, because the threat of climate change is an existential threat.
But isn't it a big public subsidy? Because you said to me when we last talked about this that there was no subsidy in this. It's a massive public subsidy. The taxpayers are funding this to a large extent.
Well, the policy of the coalition was that nuclear would get no extra advantages against other forms of low carbon.
But it is a subsidy.
Well, it's no extra support against others. So it depends how you define the subsidy. If it's no subsidy against the others,
it's an
then
extra
it's okay.
cost. Hang on, Ed. It's an extra cost to the user. And that's the point. When we looked at all the investment, there's an 18% increase in the bills to the energy user in their homes.
Margaret, do you
from
believe,
the capital investment.
Do you believe
Extra
the
cost to
polluter
the
should
user.
pay? Do you believe the polluter should pay?
Pardon?
Do you believe the polluter should pay?
Yeah.
Well, then if you do,
But
then, hold on. If you do, and you look at the price of coal and gas, they ought to have a carbon price attached to them. Nobody, when they discuss this, ever does that. But coal and gas are causing climate change. They don't pay their true costs. If they did, then renewables and nuclear would seem much more cost-effective.
Well, on that we'll have to leave
I might
it.
agree with you on that one.
Oh, good. Well, we'll finish on agreement. Ed Davey, thank you.
Thank you very much.